G'day legends. Today we are going to go in depth with adventure surf photographer Rambo Estrada from New Zealand. But when I spoke to him, he was doing a bit of van lifing along the Gold Coast on the east coast of Australia. It was great to catch up with him. He has got a brand new book that is just about to launch. It's open for pre-sales right now, and it's called Unbound, and it is incredible. He showed me a couple of the pages from it, and you'll see a couple of the pages dotted throughout this podcast today, and the work is incredible. So, what we talk about in today's discussion is just the process of making a book, seeding the idea, executing it, and then the production. And it's super interesting. I found it really interesting and inspiring. So I hope you can stick around to the end. It is a long form, goes for about 1 hour, but there is a lot of gold. So sit down and take it all in.
G'day, Rambo. How's it going, mate?
Tom, good. Thanks, brother.
Thanks for coming on. Where are you coming in from today?
I'm sitting in my van at Snapper Rocks, been for a little surf this morning and hanging out. The waves are pretty fun. So I'm over in Oz. I've been here for maybe 6 weeks, and then I'm here for a couple more weeks. So yeah, just having a bit of downtime and doing a bit of surfing, and yeah, it's been amazing. Was that noisy? That car starting up?
You've got some ambient noise coming in from Snapper Rocks already.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah, finally a little southerly swell hit yesterday, hey?
Yeah.
It's been
Yeah.
typical spring otherwise.
And a break from the northerlies. Happy about that.
Yeah, so do you spend a bit of time in between New Zealand and Australia, or is it
Yeah,
just
I
hot?
like to come over here in winter. I don't really like Australia so much in summer. It's a bit hot for me, and the waves aren't great. So yeah, I love winter. I like trying to pretend I know how to ride a longboard. So there's lots of little longboard sand bottom runners. So yeah, that's a
Nice,
good
nice.
place to be.
Well, today I saw that you've released or just about to release a brand new book called Unbound, and it looks insane from what I've seen so far.
Cheers.
And yeah, really excited to explore it further. But yeah, so I just thought I'd come on today and have a chat to you about the process of that. But maybe before we get into that, just let some of the viewers, I'm sure a lot of my followers and my members of my photography course already know about your work and probably follow your work. But yeah, if you could just give us a little bit of a rundown how you actually got into photography in the first place, that'd be a good starting point.
Yeah, I think around about the same time found actually no, first of all I found old SLR, like a film manual camera, and I really like numbers, so maths has always been a real strong point for me. So the exposure triangle actually fascinated me. So just all the different combinations that you could do of the three different elements to give the same exposure, I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And then when I worked out like the aperture numbers, you know how they're all like 6.3, 7.1, I was like, why are these numbers so weird? So I sort of looked into it, and I was like, it's like a formula that's letting in twice as much light. And that's like to do with the circumference of the iris of the lens. Then when I realized, so, you can go 6.3 at 500th of a second, or you can do 4.5 at a thousandth of a second, and it looks exactly the same. I was like, whoa, that's pretty cool. And then when you bring ISO in there as well, it's all the same sort of stuff. That all doubles anyway. I'm sure everyone knows most of that stuff. But for me, when I first picked up a camera, that's what really got me into it, was like, I want to master how all this stuff works. More interested in the process than actual image making. And I mostly just used to shoot dorky portraits of my friends. And then my girlfriend at the time saw that I was, she was like, well, here's something he likes. And so she gave me one of the early digital point and shoots for my birthday. And then with that, I used to shoot heaps of lineup shots just to make my friends jealous when I went somewhere and it was good. And then just kind of progressed from there. Lineup shots has always been what I've been drawn to. And as a surfer, that was sort of something that I was more stoked to see, as, like somewhere, like a scene that I would love to be in myself, rather than seeing someone amazing get barrel to do a ear or whatever. That didn't really speak to me as much as seeing lineups. So yeah, that's something that spoke to me at the start. And then that's sort of what continues to sort of drive me the most, is sort of shooting lineups. And New Zealand's like the landscapes are beautiful, everything's sort of raw and wild. And so it's really nice to be able to include some of those elements into surf photos, just to give people sort of more of a sense of what it's actually like to be there. And I think I'm real lucky too, because I tell someone, so if I'm traveling and I say, how I'm from New Zealand, there's two responses. People are like, I went there and I loved it, or I really want to go there. And so because of that, I'm sort of like a portal into how awesome New Zealand is for a lot of people. So I think that's sort of the main reason why I built quite a good following, was just people were interested in seeing more of this sort of mysterious land at the bottom of the world.
It's true. I love the fact that, your first interest was the line-up shots, and you probably only had the gear because it was a point-and-shoot camera to get a line-up shot rather
For
than a
sure.
tight action shot. And it was what you loved anyway, but then you leaned into it, and now it's obvious to me that that's where your strength lies, with incredible landscapes that have waves in them. But what talks to me mostly about your photography is your incredible natural composition, which you can't teach that stuff. Hey, it's like, you can get good at the numbers and you can train yourself on the numbers and everything like that, but that inherent ability to compose is a real strength of your photography. And having a place that's got so many cool backdrops like New
Yeah.
Zealand, it just adds to that. And I think that's why the strength of your photography has come through, and it has been so popular. So
Yeah,
um,
yeah, it's an
yeah, that's cool.
interesting point because I don't really think I'm a very creative person,
Mm,
but I'm very analytical, and so
okay.
I can I've always looked at people that are creative, and then I analyze what it is that makes their photo creative, and then I take that
Right.
on myself. Whereas I feel like naturally some people can just pick up a camera and I'm like, oh man, I would never would have thought of shooting it like that way. So I feel like for me, yeah, like if I look at my early photos, they're not great. That's for sure. So it wasn't like I was like straight away just a master of composition or anything. I think I just sort of learnt that over I think actually probably what it is I'm real analytical of my own work as well. So I've never taken a photo that I think is like amazing.
Never.
I've never ever taken a photo and been like, oh yeah, you've nailed it. That's as good as it's going to get. So I always will look for things that are wrong in the image, and then that gives you something to work on.
That's cool. I like that. I mean, never been impressed with, I mean, looking back at your older work and just going, oh, I don't like that anymore, is not such a bad thing, because it means you've progressed, because,
Yeah, for sure.
you've found ways to clean up that image. But it's still good to pat yourself on the back as well, because like some of your images, like if you say sent me, because I critique images for my water photographer members
Right.
all the time, and I can normally give something to the image even if it's a strong image. But there's certainly pictures of yours that I would just go, yeah, well done, mate. I don't know if I'd be
Uh,
able to find, like actually, I said to one of my colleagues only yesterday, I think it was, that I was going to be chatting to you, and he said, oh yeah, his image is just so damn perfect.
yeah,
So
right.
that was his take on it, and he's actually, interestingly enough, he's actually a very creative and sort of um, eccentric thinking fellow. So
Right.
maybe he was picking up on your analytical uh,
Yeah.
analysis of a photo, and how to just get it all looking so nice and not neat, but it's like, yeah, it is. It's like it is all. It's hard to fault. So it's interesting that you can fault every single photo that you've taken.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
crazy.
Definitely. There's
Yeah,
definitely
really.
room for improvement there for sure.
Is it stuff like composition? It's like, I think that it's unlikely that it's an exposure problem or a focus problem or those sort of low level technical sort of problems. Is it,
Yeah.
or is it just
It's
angle?
it's often like a perfect photo for me would be a perfect composition with a perfect wave, with a perfect backdrop and like amazing light. And so maybe I've had like three of those things nailed before, but I've
Okay.
never had one where it's like all four of those things all together, all in one image that I'm like, oh yeah, I couldn't have done any of those four things better, I guess.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
that's probably it. There's definitely a lot of photos I'm proud of for sure. But yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think I've shot the perfect photo yet.
Yeah, cool. And so just getting back to the way where you started, you're already a surfer.
Hmm.
A lot of people just get so surprised when they see a photographer with a board under their arm, and they go, "Oh, you actually surf." It's like,
Yeah, sure.
I don't think there's many surf photographers that actually don't surf. There probably are a few, but yeah, well, we all surf passionately, and like my story was like I was just so enthralled with pictures in the magazines that it inspired me to surf because I was like, 13 or 14. I wasn't really living in a surf area, and those pictures just pulled me in somehow. It's so powerful. And then when I actually got to surf, the surfing feeling was so amazing. So then I carried on and became a surfer. But then that the power of those photos got me into photography to try and create that for maybe
Yeah,
other
amazing.
people, I suppose, because I saw the power of it. So your motivation behind photography, you said, was more numbers. It wasn't, or was it like, was it a surfing thing, like where you wanted to? Well, you said you wanted to show your mates, I suppose, didn't you?
Yeah, it definitely, I would often shoot a lineup. So I learnt pretty quickly when I first started, had the camera, I would go somewhere, be frothed out, run straight away, go for a surf. And then New Zealand, the windows of good conditions are quite small. And so often I'd come in and then I'd go to take the photo and be like, Emma, it's nowhere near as good. My friends are going to be nowhere near as jealous as they could have been. So then I learned pretty quickly that it's good to take a bit of 10 minutes before you go for the surf if you want to really make your friends jealous. So that was sort of my main motivation. And then as I upgraded my gear, New Zealand's a pretty small surf community and even smaller surf photography community. So there was a few people that helped me out. Corey Scott is a sort of, I would classify him as being the best surf photographer New Zealand's ever produced. He was real generous with me, and he's also someone that doesn't sugarcoat things. He's quite harsh.
Yeah.
And so when he looked at one of my photos, he wouldn't say, "Oh yeah, that's cool, man. You've done so well." He would be like, "You could do this better, or you could do this better, or you could do this." And then maybe if it was like a real good one, he'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's pretty sick," But he wasn't there to give compliments. He was there to help sort of guide me that could sort of improve my photography skills. And
Yeah.
that was amazing having someone like that. When you have someone that's really hard to impress, it drives you a lot to, I want to show Corey this one. I'm so proud of it. And then he'll probably tell me the things I could have done better. But then it's always pushing rather than if you have someone that's always saying, "Oh yeah, man, you're ripping. Those are so cool. They're amazing." Then I feel like you're not really going to be as driven to improve.
True, true. So good to have a mentor, and sound like you had it fairly early on, but just been, like you said, like you can't really do something if someone says, "Oh yeah, that's great, man, that's rad." Like that's good, I suppose, but yeah, there's nothing much that you can do to progress with that. So
I
if
think
the
the
person
best
can come in, yeah, sorry, go on.
Oh, I think the best way to progress is what you're doing with photography critiques, where you've got someone that's experienced and they're taking the time to look over your images, and you might have no idea, what you could have done better, but that someone with a
Mhm.
with an eye like yours who's got that experience can point out little bits and pieces for them, and those they might learn more out of that 5 or 10 minutes than they would in like 2 years on their own shooting.
Yeah, I think I would have, like, I did. It was a lonely pursuit for me for at least 10 years, probably even longer. Like, yeah, I didn't surround myself with many photographers. I was working out of a small town in New South Wales, just north of Coffs Harbour, and there was a few photographers around, but like, I didn't really, it was very insular for me. And
Hmm.
yeah, I see the flaws in that. I think I could have progressed a lot more in my first decade of shooting. So that's why I love the community I've created, like being able to yeah, get these photographers together, and like they're working amongst themselves and everything like that. And when I'm giving critique, I'm careful not to think it's just like my taste as well, because I don't want to discourage them if they're
Right.
going down this path, which I just like, doesn't quite sit right with me. So I'm very careful where I say, well, this is like, this could be a taste thing, or but this is what I see, and you've got to decide whether that resonates with you, or you keep going in the direction which I'm sort of going, no, I don't like that sort of thing.
Right.
So I mean, it's just all you can do is from your perspective, but at the same time, I know what has been successful with my photos and what has not been successful with my photos on a commercial level, on a personal level, on all those sort of things. So I suppose that's where yourself and myself and other photographers that have been doing it for like decades can just give that little bit of experience to someone that's only just started, 3 or 4 years ago, or just started. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, it's a cool thing. But yeah, getting to the book thing, just New Zealand. I've been there 3 or 4 times and just absolutely love it. But I think it's 4 times now. But all 4 times I've been on an agenda of working commercial jobs. So they've
Right.
taken me to some cool places, but like, it's always been an agenda, and I haven't been able to like necessarily explore the surf. Like only 1 or 2 times I've taken a surfboard, and then I hardly surfed it anyway. So I haven't ever done the surfing experience really in New Zealand. I've just been working for the top 10 holiday parks over there in New Zealand.
Nice. I like the way you pronounce 10 properly.
Uh, um, I just love the accent. But yeah, anyway, me and my family loved going over there, and just like the landscapes around the ocean or inland are just like nothing like you see in Australia, especially in the South Island.
Hmm.
The North Island sort of got a bit of similarities with Australia, but even then it's still quite different. But yeah, just the backdrops there, I just like freak out. And I went to a few of the places that have got pretty solid backdrops, like the south of the South Island and the top northeast, I think.
Oh yeah.
There's a couple of locations that just insane backdrops, and super envious of that. You don't really get too many opportunities in Australia for that. And
Right.
that's the basis of what I suppose you're chasing. What I did notice in New Zealand while I was over there is at any chance I would get to the ocean and check out the ocean, but it is like, I think you mentioned it before, it's so changeable, so quick there. So just scoring those moments where it is just so perfect and lined up with the right winds and the swell and good light too, because the light's like just all over the place there, and it can
For
be
sure.
very cloudy. And not necessarily that cloud's a bad thing with some photos, but yeah, just getting that light is what I suppose it's a work in progress. I mean, how long did this book take you to like compile? Is it
So I wasn't really. I've been asked for a book for quite some time, and I wasn't
okay?
really comfortable in putting out a book yet because I felt like a book is sort of traditionally for surf photography, a book's something you do at the end of your career. It's like, oh,
Right.
this is what I've done. I didn't, even though I'm an old guy, I'm not quite. I feel like I've still
No.
got a few years left in me yet. So then the more I thought about it, I was like, oh, I could do more of a road trip themed book. And put aside 18 months. And originally I was going to shoot everything as 100% fresh content. New Zealand's, yeah, like you're saying, it's so changeable and it's so fickle that there's a lot of spots that don't spark up in 18 months. And I didn't want people to buy the book thinking of one of my photos that they love and then it not being in there. I didn't want
Okay.
someone to buy it and be disappointed and be like, oh man, I was really hoping that photo he's got, this break was going to be in there and it's not.
Mm,
So probably about 60% of it ended up being fresh content over that 18 months. And then the other 40% sort of some of the classic hits from the archive. A lot of the, probably maybe like 25% of it would be ones that people are familiar with. And then there's some other stuff that I dug pretty deep in the archive or I'd been sort of stashing away.
really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I shot it over around 18 months, majority of the fresh content. Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. I mean, it would be, from my perspective, I haven't made a book, but from my perspective, it'd be really hard to leave out older photos.
For
And,
sure.
that are stronger, say if you had a stronger picture of a certain break, and just because it was taken the last 18 months, leave that out of the equation. So,
Yeah, it was just a
so to
stupid
speak.
rule I made for myself, and then
Yeah.
once I thought about that, I was like, oh, why put out a lesser book just for some dumb rule you made yourself that no one else really cares about?
Yeah, but that rule got you to a point. I reckon that without that rule, you might not have gone hard in the 18 months to get the
For
content,
sure.
thinking that, yeah, so you've sort of got to play tricks with yourself sometimes
Yeah,
with that motivation and that. So I think that was probably a key to the way you structured that, and to get 60% in 18 months. And you've been shooting. When did you start? When did you get your first SLR? Do you remember the year around about?
I've been a full-time photographer for 10 years, and then
Okay.
I would have done it as a hobby for 10 years before that.
Yeah, yeah.
As
So
a hobby,
20 years.
yeah, as a sort of the last 5 years, it was a hobby that made money, and then yeah, so kind of like
Yeah, yeah.
15 years, sort of making some sort of return on it.
Yeah, that's solid. But I mean, just to play percentages for your numbers mind, 20 years and you got 60% in the last 18 months is that's pretty impressive to
Yeah,
get to
but
go.
I was a lot more focused in that 18 months than,
Okay.
I did.
Yeah.
I, I I did a lot more shooting and was and put in a
Mm,
lot more time on the road. I
yeah.
punished myself a lot more than I usually would have.
Right.
It wasn't like it was just a regular 18 months. Yeah, it was quite a committed 18 months for sure.
Yeah. Did you sacrifice? I mean, you would have had to, I imagine, but did you sacrifice a lot for, during that 18 months to, like, as far as, your work? Because, like, you're working on a book, and I'd imagine that there might be times where you are getting an immediate return on some of the work that you're doing, but
Hmm.
on the whole, probably not until the book comes out. And then, yeah, I mean, we can talk about the financial rewards of the book, but I would imagine that is sort of more of a loss leader to future work rather than the book actually making you any sort of like real crazy income.
Yeah,
But
yeah, for sure.
um, I went a bit all over the place with that question, but I suppose, yeah, like what did you sacrifice a lot of your paid work?
Not
Um,
really. So
I didn't,
I
yeah.
shoot the only photography work that I consider I do for money. So
Mm,
I don't really consider that I do surf photography for money like that. It makes money, but
mm,
that's not my motivation. That makes sense.
mm.
So
Yeah, sure.
there's one photography job that I do for money, and that's shooting weddings. And
Yeah,
so you have a certain amount of weddings all structured in, and you have to edit them and get them out. So I wasn't turning down any of that work,
okay.
or I wasn't sacrificing any of that, but I was not having any days off. If that makes sense, or far from days off. So any downtime
Yeah,
I had, I was yeah, shooting the book or laying up the book, or so. And I would work till sort of 10:30, 11 each night.
wow. Yeah,
Because I was also learning as I went as well. So I laid the whole book up myself. Um,
true.
yeah,
Right. Oh, wow.
I didn't want to. I would be a terrible client. Like if someone else was going to lay it up for me, I would just be the worst. I found I started mocking it up, and then I found that part of the whole process to be the most rewarding when I was putting images on the page. And the most rewarding part for me was pairing images. So that's
Yeah.
getting, a surf image and a lifestyle image together
Mm.
where the tones and the colors sort of complement each other. And that was really, really satisfying. So I'm super glad I didn't give that part of the process away to someone else. The book probably would have looked a little bit nicer, but hey,
Maybe.
well, maybe it wouldn't because I probably would, I made so many changes and so many changes. And if someone else was doing it, then
Yeah.
it would, A, you'd feel bad for them, and B, it would be expensive.
Yeah.
So yeah, though my publisher was horrified because I was literally like 2 days before deadline, I was like swapping out photos, and he was like, "You can't do that," and I was like, "Well, I can do that, and I'm gonna."
That's it. No,
Yeah.
that's radical. And like, it just goes back to your taste with composition, like, which, it's hard when someone talks about your style. People say, I've got a style, and you don't really know your own style because it's
Hmm.
just you do what you do. So you might relate to that, just the way you do things, and like, the way you laid out. I just saw the back cover. I just came on here before and looked at the website. I think it's on your back cover where you've got your top down of
Oh
all
yeah.
your gear, and just aesthetically how you're lining stuff out, and thinking that way. That doesn't surprise me that you did the graphic design for it, and it's cool that you liked that process. And I saw that it's volume one, so maybe you have got somewhere in the back of your head you're going to do another one, and if you did, would you lay it out again yourself, or
Yeah, I definitely lay it out again myself for
yeah?
sure. Yeah,
So it's not a
I will do another
yeah.
one. Yeah.
That's cool.
My main motivation for doing another one is I'm going to be far more experienced at making a book. And so
Mm.
I feel like everything I learnt making this one, I could potentially make a book that I could happily retire on. If that makes sense. I could be like, this is
Yeah,
as good as it gets. But then probably what will
the slam.
happen is I'll get to that stage and then people will be like, oh, I like volume one better. That's just how
Yeah,
it is.
like I like your old shit better than your new shit.
Yeah, like a debut album.
Typical first album. Yeah, yeah.
Another
That's
thing,
fine.
sorry, another thing I really loved about doing the layout is it's a
Mm.
second opportunity to recompose how your photo looks with how it's cropped. You know, like if you've
Mm.
got a photo, like I have one photo that's quite an iconic one of mine, and the surf's really good. And then there's sort of an awkward amount of sky, and then the sky's not a very nice color. And then when I laid it on the book, I was just like, well, that sky doesn't need to be there. I can just do like a longer, image. And then I was like, "Whoa, this looks so much better without that sky in there." And it
Came to
was,
life.
yeah, and I found that super rewarding too, just be able to change up compositions.
That's super interesting. I had that conversation only a couple of nights ago with a Scotland photographer that I was talking to, and he was we did a little interview about personal projects, and he got a graphic designer to lay out. I think this is a pitch deck actually, but what we got talking about is that how surprising it is when someone else gets hold of your photos and
Right.
they do stuff like that, like crop it a different way or lay it out with a combination of photos. And like quite often in the past when I've submitted to editorial magazines or even some commercial work, and I've seen the way the graphic designers come out, and it's like a photo that I sort of half liked is like, oh, that looks so good,
Yeah, yeah.
even if it's the way they position the text in the negative space of the picture, and it's like it just makes the picture so it looks so much more special. So yeah, I get it that you'd want to, and it's so cool that you laid it out. But I would be nervous to think, oh, how much better could this look with a graphic designer
Yeah.
that
I'm
could make those choices.
I'm happy with how it came out. And like when I got it, I was like, oh,
Yeah,
this looks like a real book. Like
yeah,
I didn't fail, but I am
uh,
a little nervous for like an actual legit graphic designer to like turn through the pages and be like, maybe they might be cringing, being like, oh, why did he do that? Or, ooh, like,
yeah. You've probably made mistakes, but like really, it's like 0.001% of the people that look at your book are going to be a critical graphic designer. So who cares really anyway?
for sure. I think the layout's quite simple that you will sort of look through it as in like you wouldn't, it's not something that you'll notice. Um,
Mm,
you're just going to look at the images and then if you were a graphic designer, you might notice
mm.
it, but I don't think most other people will just be looking at the images, enjoying the images without, there's nothing sort of super crazy in the layout that, that people are going to be like, oh, cool layout, or I hate your layout. It's just like,
Yes.
it's just there.
Yeah. As a photographer, you make it more about your photos. So, like for my first four website iterations, like I got a web designer to do my website, right? And each time I said like, not too much stuff, like not too many
Yeah,
designs, widgets, and whatever. Like I just wanted to be cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. And it's like they sort of got it to an extent, but it was still like it was more about the design and less about the photos. And when you're a
right.
photographer, it's got to be about the photos. I get it for other of their clients that aren't photographers that they've got to bring in a lot heavy on the design. Anyway, and then like for years I've had a Squarespace site, but when Squarespace came about and you didn't have to be HTML or like
Oh, yeah.
coding genius to make a website, like Squarespace is like drag and drop, and it's like epic. I just downloaded Squarespace, I got a white blank page, and I just laid up my photos,
Yeah,
and it's
nice.
like. And then I've gone into graphic designers because I work with graphic designers a lot because we get each other work and stuff like that in the commercial environment. And they bring up my website in the first meeting. They go, "Love your web." Like they make websites. They go, "Oh, I love your website. It's so cool."
Yeah,
It's like I did it with no experience with Squarespace. It's like the reason why it's good is because I just didn't, stuff around with it. I just kept it nice and clean,
yeah,
and
epic.
that's by the sounds of it, that's how you. That's the let your photos do the design and not bring in too many squiggles and design elements and
For sure.
borders and shit like that. So yeah, that's how I would prep someone to do the graphic design if I was in your position, or I would just do it myself. I
I,
mean,
I
yeah,
think
it sounds like you're out.
your book's less likely to age as well. Like the
Yeah,
layouts, it's going to be more timeless if you've got like if you've got a layout that you don't really notice, then it's yeah, it's just going to be the imagery people are going to enjoy for years instead of
what's cool now with graphic design and is hip is not you just don't think like, your fashion's going to go out of date, but it absolutely will. And so will heavy graphic design. One thing I really saw was getting into the wedding photography style of it. In the early 2000s, I worked in a lab processing film and developing photos and stuff like that. There was a couple of wedding photographers that we did a lot of work for, and the most expensive or prestige wedding photographer at the time, he was doing these like super contrasty, blue toned, and some black and whites with it sounds disgusting, and it sort of was like, but at the time it was so cool, but with a little bit of color coming through with the black and white.
Yeah.
And it was so in the early 2000s, late 90s. And it's like, everyone's just going, yeah, this is cool. And then 5-10 years later, like the photographer's just hanging his head in shame, just going, what was I thinking type thing.
Sure.
So that's why a clean image, and I've seen your wedding photography as well, and it's like, that's going to be timeless as well, because you haven't gone with a trend like, there's like the Instagram thing that was in 5 years ago with the blown out, highly blown out skin tones and backgrounds and stuff like that. And it's like, that was cool. And it maybe still is like got some legs now, but it won't be in 10 years. Like, that's why a well-exposed, clean photo is going to win over time. And same with the graphic design as well, I suppose. But 18 months is like really, did you like was that a goal? Like you said, you had a deadline before, and is that why you're working till 11 o'clock at night? Because you just there was no like goal, just see how long it takes.
I work till 11 o'clock at night just because I'm an animal, and I like, if I'm on a project I enjoy, I want to be doing it so it's as best as it can possibly be. And so there's I just will put in as many hours as I can fit in. And we had a deadline because we wanted it to arrive at the start of October. Because I was like, we need to get it in December, right? So we get in for like the Christmas rush. And then my publisher was like, no, you want to have it in stores so then that can sell, and then you get the Christmas reorder before, because that's when they put in the big order, because they might just order 10 books to try it out. And then if those 10 books sell, then they might order 50 books. And so if you're just getting it in for that Christmas rush, you only get the 10 books, and then they sell out, and then it's too late for them to get other ones or whatever. So
that's a good tip. Good tip.
Yeah, so it was all just working back from that date, wanting to have it in, and then I think I had about 18 months before that, so that's what I went with.
Yeah, cool. So that's good that you made the deadline, by the way, and didn't just put it off till next Christmas. But
for sure.
Is that how you envision the sales to be, through bookstores, or do you think like this day and age, and with your following and stuff, I would have imagined that most of your sales will come through the website, but are you thinking that bookstores will be where the power is, or I suppose you don't know yet. But... Yeah.
Craig, who's my publisher, he's CPL Media, so his photography, he's a surf photographer as well. He's done a couple of his own books, and then he's put out 4 books for Warren Hawke, who's a South Island surf photographer. So he's quite experienced. He's probably put out 10 or 12 books on different subjects, but a lot of it is all about either like surf or the beach or the ocean. So he's pretty experienced, and they always have sold more through retail than they have direct. But he's thinking that my book will be the one that swings it the other way. Because I have a good following, and I'm pretty good at spamming stuff out there. And so and also I know that if you make 3 times as much money, twice as much, 3 times as much money, I think, from selling a book direct. Because when you wholesale, obviously you sell it for half the price, but then you've got to pay for the price of the book in there as well. So there's so much more money to be made if you can sell it direct. And so, not that I'm motivated on, the financial, but it's definitely a good reason to go pretty hard. And then I think people want to, people that follow you, they want to support you, so they want to order it direct. But then there's my buddy Wayne. He gets every single Christmas, he gets whatever surfing book is in the bookshop from his mum for Christmas. And so his mum doesn't know, his mum might not know who I am, but she's going to go into the bookshop and she's going to see mine's the fresh book, and that's what he's going to get for Christmas. So that's the customer that you pick up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even though it's lower margin, you were never going to reach that customer yourself.
100%. Yeah, and all the tourists that come through New Zealand, like that's another thing I was fascinated with New Zealand. Like I travel around Australia for work constantly for the last decade. And I see just lots of other Australians. And
Right.
when I traveled around New Zealand, I saw New Zealanders, but mostly I saw, people from Canada, people from, America, people from UK. And like I just visited, like every spot I visited, I'm like bumping into there seems to be a high concentration of overseas tourists, and I can just imagine that. Although that's probably not a good thing to pack in the suitcase because I've heard it's quite heavy. But having said that, I think that would be a strong market as well, and a market that you might not have tapped through your Instagram or
For
following
sure.
type thing.
Yeah, people who got no idea who you are, but might pick it up and might speak to them. Yeah, yeah. Well, New Zealand's biggest industry is tourism, whereas Australia's is probably raping the environment for the natural resources.
Seems to be that way.
So that's why we're a small country and we make most of our money from tourism. So yeah, we definitely have a lot of people coming through for how small a country we are. Yeah.
Yeah. You talked about having a publisher. One of my friends from South Australia who did a bike riding mission around South Australia for many months made a book on that experience, and he self-published and got. I can't remember the numbers, but I think it was around 500 books, and he just didn't have any idea about what 500 books look like because the day came where they got delivered to his house, and he just thought he'd just get a delivery. And it was astounding how much, he filled up the spare room to the roof and stuff like that.
Right.
Like, he had to put them somewhere else. So I'm guessing that because you're not self-publishing, am I correct in saying that you didn't have to pay up front and then take delivery and then store all these, hundreds of books or however many books that you're printing?
Yeah. So my publisher's pretty mellow. He's real chill, and he was kind of like, he just wanted to do something that would work best for both of us. So we ended up splitting the costs of the production. And then we have a percentage that we split once we sell each book. And that's sort of the same or similar, pretty similar. So that way it's sort of nice and clean. But he was like, I can pay for the whole thing if you want to. And I was like, well, I've shot a bunch of weddings and it's just sitting there. So we'll use it for something. And then they're all getting delivered to his house, and his spare room will be full of books. But so when we're just trying to work out now with the pre-sales so we're going to send out all the pre-sales ourselves. So I'll go to his house and then we will put books in boxes, and it'll be quite cool because then, I can play a part, and if it's someone I know, I can write something in their book or whatever. But he's like, there's a sort of a tipping point because he's from a magazine background. He's like, there was a tipping point for subscriptions where you did a certain amount and then you outsource it because it's worthwhile to outsource it. But I think this is my first book. It'd be fun to go and see how many books looks like and what it's like to pack boxes and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we'll be packing them, but then Craig will look after a regular dispatch to like retailers and reorders and that kind of stuff. Yeah, the general ones, but I'll be in there for the pre-sales. So the pre-sales have been bigger than we expected, and a lot bigger than what Craig's experienced in the past. But I probably did a lot bigger push with the pre-sales than what they have in the past.
Well, I don't know. I only came across it just probably a day before I reached out to you, actually.
Yeah, it's only been online for like Tuesday, so yeah, 4 days.
Yeah.
But we've already done more than he hoped we would, and the pre-sales are for a month. But I think you get a massive boost at the start of a pre-sale. And then during the middle, it's kind of like just a few here and there. And then I think at the end of the pre-sale, you get another boost where you're like, hey, pre-sales are closing. If you want these free prints, you got to get in now.
Yeah.
And so you get like a boost at the end.
Yeah, it depends on the psychology. Oh, yeah, okay, so you've got a call to action with the free prints. That's only a pre-sale deal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just if you're looking at, I'll put the links obviously below this this YouTube video, and you can go and check out the book and pre-sale it get the pre-sale special, but yeah, at the moment you can buy the book and you get, is it 4 A4 prints?
Yeah, that's
of,
right. Yeah,
of some
the
of-
the
yeah.
four of my favorite A4 prints. So if I was going to put 4 prints on the wall from in my
Oh,
house,
cool.
those are the ones I would go for. Yeah.
That's so good. So at the time of this recording, it's 14th of September 2024. So when's the pre-sale closing down?
We were looking at early October. I don't actually if we're actually set a date yet.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have a ETA for the book, but it just depends on customs and that kind of stuff. So obviously, once the books arrive, the pre-sales are. But
Yeah.
I do have the advanced copy. You want to see how thick it is?
Yeah. Epic. Oh yes.
It's so
That's
thick. Yeah, it's 300 pages, so it's a lot.
wow. I didn't know. It's hard to tell from the website,
I know.
but
Yeah,
that
I
is a
kind of want to do a video where I'm like, this is how thick it is. It's a lot.
yeah. Well, there's
But
a video that definitely showed it to me.
I
Crazy.
I will do at some stage. Yeah, because yeah, Craig's book that he did himself, his surf photography book was 160 pages, and then
Okay.
generally like a pretty thick sort of book would be like 200 pages. And I've got no idea why he let me do 300 pages for my first book, but he did.
Yeah.
But I had about 380 laid up. Uh, so there was
Wow.
yeah, there wasn't a
That's an incredible amount of photos. Like, wow. How many photos is it? Like 300?
it's
Do you know the number or?
yeah, I think it's just over 300 because
Okay.
some obviously some photos are across 2 pages. Well, a lot of
Yeah,
photos
yeah.
are across 2 pages. Yeah, yeah,
Oh, okay. Excellent.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's cool. Yeah, but it's great that you got the depth to fill up 300 and then be confident about making volume two. That's so cool. Is there is there much text within the book? And if so, who wrote it?
Yeah, so I had conversations with 12 people who I think are interesting sort of characters in New Zealand surf culture. Like Maz Quinn, he's obviously the most famous surfer we had in New Zealand, so I had a chat to him. And each conversation, each person I talked with grew up in an area, is quite iconic to that area, has moved away and done a lot of stuff in their time, and then now live back in that area. So the conversations each start with, what was like growing up here, when did you start surfing? Who did you look up to? What was some of your experiences? And then through the middle, talk about what they did throughout their life. And then at the end is like, why do you live here again? And could you live anywhere else? And so the text it's just the raw conversations that we had together. And all 12 of the people are people that I know, personally. And so it wasn't hard for us to have a conversation. It was just like a casual thing. And I'd always have things that I always wondered about Maz, wanted to ask him. Yeah, then there's some other, I was wanted to have like, that crusty old local that you always see hanging around the car park. I'm like, yeah, that guy must have a lot of stories. I originally was hoping on having a few more misfits in there, but as I shot
Yeah.
it, I wanted to have sort of surf action of each person, and I wanted the surf action to sort of be to a level that didn't look out of place with the rest of the imagery in the book. And so
Right.
worked, and it was more work to get those images than I first imagined. So it's ended up everyone that's in it is a pretty good surfer to be able to come
Yeah,
through with some
that's interesting.
imagery that
That's
stands
interesting.
up. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. So did you just set up, like, did you just like record audio, or did you set up like a, proper camera, and so you'd
I
potentially
started
double up as a video?
the first few I videoed because I
Yeah.
was like, oh yeah, I'm going to make a YouTube teaser or something with, a line from each person or something like that. But
Yeah.
after a while, I just ended up just doing a voice memo on my phone.
Okay.
And then it was pretty easy. I just will feed that into a AI app called Cockatoo, which
Okay.
just transcribes it all. It does struggle a little bit with the Kiwi accent. So it's not perfect, but it's a really good starting point rather than if you try to type everything out word by word. It'd be pretty painful.
Yeah.
And then for each image, I would do a caption. Let's see if I can find a good example of this. Oh yeah, okay. This is a pretty good example, first page. So that's my caption for that image. So the captions are pretty substantial,
Yeah.
and I wanted so with the book, I don't name any surf spots because
Awesome.
I think that's sort of unfair to anyone that lives there, and I want them to be welcoming me every time I go back. But I also wanted to have like a sense of mystery for the book and
Yeah.
just show people that like there's so much amazing stuff outside of your neighborhood and you can go and find it if you want to. So I wanted to sort of
Yeah.
inspire people to go out and find their own cool stuff. So, but because of that, that would have been the easiest thing to write for every caption, right? Would have been like, oh, Raglan, it's got these three
Yeah.
perfect point breaks or whatever. But when you take that out, you've just got to try and come up with something that's relevant to that photo. So that one that I showed you, that was a story about the first time I ever swam at that spot. And I was just totally terrified. And I got thrown over the falls before I even took a photo, hit the bottom and then swam in. Um, so the, in that place or experience that I had that is relevant to that spot. And I guess as well, the reason that I wanted to have the back of the book be this, which is a guy with all his stuff, is that it's a book about this guy's experience rather than being like, oh, this is a guide to New Zealand or whatever. So a lot of the captions are quite personal. Some of them might even be too personal, but yeah, so there's a lot of depth in the photos, the captions for the photos as well. So yeah, it's not a book that you'll be able to, I don't think you'll be able to read it in a day.
No.
There's a lot in there. Yeah. But it's
Oh,
also a book. I understand that people are quite intimidated by really big blocks of text.
okay.
Especially now, our attention spans are pretty short. And
Mm.
so I wanted to make it where you could just open any page. Oh yeah, there's a caption. I can bang
Yeah.
that out while
Digest.
I'm sitting on the toilet or something. And so it's sort of digestible. Each sort of page you can read as its own thing. And even the conversations are kind of digestible because it's just like a back and forth.
Yes. Oh, that's so cool. I love that format. You get me so stoked about the book, and I'm gonna have to get my pre-order in.
Yeah.
Love it's an art of caption writing, and even like where we have to do it with our Instagram messages and yeah, Instagram posts and stuff these
Right.
days. But yeah, you see so many captions where it just explains what the photo is. It's like that's not a caption. That's just a waste of time, really, because
Yeah.
photo if the photo is good enough, it should tell you a lot. So then you do have to go on another tangent. So that personal story is something that no one's going to be able to see in that particular photo that you just showed then.
Right.
But the good thing about being personal is that quite often, I'm sure that if I read that caption, I haven't read the caption yet, but I'm quite sure if I read that caption, I could put my story into your story,
Sure.
and that's where the connection happens. So I really think that you got on the right track with that. Opening yourself up personally, because then everyone's got a version of that, whether it's like 1 foot wave at Manly when they got
Right.
beaten down, but when they're trying to learn to swim, or it could have been just like it could be like a pipeline wave that land on your head and like taught you a few lessons type thing. But everyone's going to have an experience of the ocean which they can relate in that particular caption. So yeah, if that's a consistent theme throughout, I think that's pretty good. Yeah, I think that's all you can really do as well. Like that's the only thing you can generally come in with, and then the conversations are really good because then it gives a different dimension. So it's not just you talking about New Zealand; you're getting other people's like feeling on the landscapes and why they
Yeah,
live
for
there and
sure. And it's
everything
sort
like
of
that.
with that road trip theme, you always will meet interesting characters on the road,
Oh
and
yeah,
learn their stories. So yeah, that's sort of how I wanted to break up just the photos was, the people that you
yeah,
meet while you're on the road.
yeah. It's interesting. I've been sort of semi sitting on a personal project, which is getting back to whether you chose those 12 really good surfers, and like I've got an opportunity to say pick on a series of really talented surfers, but I'm sort of like more interested in the stories of these unknown guys that are like known in an area but not known outside the area, but they've
Yeah,
got
yeah,
such a
cool.
rich story and bringing that story to fruition. So yeah, it's an interesting choice that that could be a volume 2 thing, but it's interesting. I get what you're saying, like, getting a surf action. I mean, it's easier with a still picture than a video, but
For sure.
it is hard to match that
Yeah.
style, I suppose, and that's something you're going to pick on if the photos all perfectly laid out, correct, and everything composed and everything like that, good lighting, but the guy's sort of obviously bogging a rail or something like
hmm
that. That's going to irk you. So I can see why maybe you made that choice
Yeah.
for this book.
For volume 2, I've already decided how I'm going to restructure it. I'm going to make each person, because as I did it, I would go to where they lived and would shoot in their neighborhood. And then often I ended up going back like 2 or 3 times. But I want to make it so every person that I feature in the next one will come with me on like a week road trip somewhere. So we're spending
Wow.
a week together somewhere interesting. And then, yeah, that way it'll be a lot easier to get cool lifestyles. So I want the lifestyle to be more like environmental lifestyles, like in a
Mm.
cool scene, or just more natural sort of a lifestyle. Whereas the ones for this book were more portraits, I guess. So
Yeah.
yeah, and also it'll be spending time with people that are cool and interesting on a trip, rather than a lot of the trips I do are on my own, because I'm pretty focused on getting the
Mm.
most I can out of them without any distractions. So it'll be sort of a new challenge for me too. But I think I think often I'll just maybe just rent like a little shack, beach shack or something somewhere it's interesting, and go hang there for a week, and then
Mm.
see what we can come away with.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Love that concept. And like, that depth as a photographer that, worked for decades, you can pull a really good photo in pretty much any lighting because, you've got all your tricks and stuff, but whether that fully resonates with the viewer or not.
Mm.
And I call it the magic. There's this special source in a photo which can't be quantified. Like I can't say, well, the reason why this photo, or I can to a point, I can say why it's the way it's composed is a good portrait, the way the lighting is done is a good portrait, the lens choice is a good port. I can say all those things, but then there's a special something that attracts the viewer that is not any of that. And
Yep.
what it is, like I've found, is the relationship between the person that's getting the photo taken and the photographer. And if you take that time, like if I've got a half an hour with someone, the old Tom would have just like shot from the get go. Like I've only got a
Right.
half an hour. I'll use 29 minutes to get as many photos as I can, and they're off. And now I'll use 25 minutes talking to them without a camera in my hand, and then just nail the shot at the end. And I
Yeah,
know
for
that that's going
sure.
to be a way more impactful shot. So your theory about spending a week with them, like that's going to, even if you know them now, that's going to develop such a richer relationship that there's going to be a lot more heart in your photos. So I
Yeah.
really like that tip for for photographers.
I think there'll be a sort of candidness to the imagery as well,
Mm,
that I really want to, yeah, to have look as sort of authentic portraits, rather than like a
mm.
super structured portrait. Yeah, sort of going to be the main difference that I'll do for volume 2, because I want to make sure that I'm enjoying it too, rather than just, you know, pounding away as a weird guy that goes places on his own. And I think I'll get a lot more out of it personally if I'm spending time with these people that are interesting, and we'll be having, instead of doing one conversation, we'll be having cool conversations all the time. So I feel like
Yeah.
that's my way that I think it's going to be a better book.
Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome. I love hearing that. You've not even got this one out there yet, and you're already thinking about your next one. That's really cool. And this one's going to have so much legs, and it's really cool that you've got it to this and inspiring to me, and I'm sure to many people watching it. So that's really epic, man. Just one more thing I wanted to just ask about is that the journey to getting these photos. Obviously, in the last 18 months, it's like, are you just like constantly looking at swell charts all the time, and then getting in your van and like, because you're up Mount Maunganui, is that
Yeah,
right?
Mount Maunganui. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, are you like looking at the South Island, or are you just like, I'll do the South Island at certain months, but I'm not even looking for a swell chart down there?
Just depends on the window that I have.
Yeah.
But yeah, most, like, I've noticed that if someone lives in Byron, their zone for surfing might be maybe Angari and Coolangatta. That's their zone. That's where they surf. But for me, I classify like the whole of New Zealand to be that zone. So I
Wow.
will keep an eye on everywhere. And then if it's physically possible to do a trip and it's going to be good, then I'll go. But I sort of, when I'm not wasn't working on the book, I have sort of a zone, the Coromandel Peninsula, which sort of starts about an hour and a bit from north of me and sort of goes for another 2 hours. Gisborne, which is 3.5 hours south of me, and Raglan, which is 2 hours across, or Taranaki, which is about 4.5 hours on. So both those are on the west coast. So it's basically everything that's in the center of the North Island on both coasts. That's sort of my comfortable zone that I will. I'll look every week and I'll be like, oh, what's going to be best this week? Where's it worth going? And sometimes none of them are. And then sometimes you're bouncing around all of them. And then the South Island, I love the south coast of the South Island. It's the rawest, wildest part of New Zealand. It's got the most swell. This is always swell on tap. And it's surprisingly, well, it's not that it's offshore, but some of the best breaks are ones where the swell's got to refract in. So the swell direction and the wind can be going from the same direction, but it's offshore. If that makes sense. It's really hard to leave when you get there, because if you look at the long range, say if I looked at the long range here on the east coast of Australia, you can be like, oh yeah, there might be a swell, maybe I should stay. Whereas down there, you're like, oh, there's another one on Tuesday. Friday's another swell. Sunday, there's another. It's just, you can't leave. It's really tough to get out of there once you get there. And because you just have to bunker down for like one stormy day, and then there's another good day, and there's no one down there. So it's amazing spot. The reason there's no one down there is because it's cold, raw, and wild. So if you like that stuff, it's a perfect spot, but most people don't like that stuff. So it's not, it's never going to get crowded, I don't think, just because it's a certain person. Like surfing here, the waves here are so amazing. The weather's beautiful. The water's warm. It's a sand bottom point. You can just walk across out and paddle in these perfect feeling waves. There's absolutely zero reason not to surf here. And that's the reason that everyone surfs. So it's nice to go to a place where there's reasons not to surf, because then you get to enjoy that experience a little bit more to yourself rather than having to share it with so many people that it sort of inhibits your enjoyment that you get from it. For me anyway. Yeah. I like, my favorite style of surfing is what I call a zero anxiety surf. So a zero anxiety surf is where you're not worrying what these three other people are doing if they're going to paddle for that wave. I love surfing here, but there's that, you're always thinking about what everyone else is doing, or that person's going to run me over or whatever. So zero anxiety surf for me is the waves might not be great, but I can catch that one if I want. I can paddle, I can catch that one. I can watch my mate catch one, and that's cool because he's my friend. So you're happy for that. But it's just, for me, there's different sorts of enjoyment that I get out on surfing. And for me, a zero anxiety surf that's as good as you get for mental health. I feel like that's when you come out of the water and you feel great about what happened. Whereas here I might get a lot better waves, but I might not feel so good about it. And you kind of have to, surfing here too, you do what you can get away with, which sometimes doesn't feel that great. You might paddle past someone and take the next wave, or drop in on someone that's a 50-50 call or something. So I went off a real tangent there. Don't even know where that came from.
I'm resonating with that. I live in Noosa, and I've got both sides of that. So like when the points are on, I've learnt over, because I've only been up here 4 or 5 years, but I came from relatively uncrowded sort of zone. But up here when the points are on, you want to be surfing because like the waves you get are just like insane when it's when it's on. But yeah, you've definitely got to. Actually, the worst part's trying to find a park to start with. That's where my anxiety is higher. And then when I've got a park, I just go, I sink a little bit, and then out in the lineup, I've got strategies now to sort of cope with that a lot better. So I think I've got better. But when the swell dies down and it goes back to the beaches, there's so much route, like it's kilometers of beach here.
Yeah, yeah,
beaches
wow.
here where you can literally go out and have your own peak even on a Saturday morning. And I have those low anxiety surfs, and it's like almost, even though the waves aren't as good, it feels good. So
Yeah.
I definitely resonate with that, because you get you get any wave you want, and you let waves go, and you just surfing by yourself again. It's interesting that you said before that you do the bulk of your traveling over the last 18 months, or maybe even your whole photography life. You're doing it solo mostly, or?
Yeah, mostly solo, yeah. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, cool.
I used to do trips with surfers when I first started getting photography because, that's how it
Mm,
goes. But I found
yeah,
the photos that I was bringing back from those shoots, I knew they were nowhere near as strong as if I just went on my own.
right.
And I think because I go on my own, that's the reason that I can have really strong lineup shots, is because I'm not getting
Mm,
distracted thinking, oh, I need to be shooting tight shots of Johnny surfing or
mm,
whatever. So I can concentrate on what I want to shoot. And then
yeah, yeah,
I run a pretty gnarly schedule when I'm on the road. Like I'm at
mm,
the beach in the dark like every day, and it's really hard to push that sort of schedule onto someone else
yeah,
that doesn't want to doesn't want to be
yeah,
maybe having such a crazy experience. Like a lot of other people would want to enjoy the trip more. But for me, that's what I enjoy. I enjoy
yeah,
making sure that I'm there that at those peak times when it's going to be best for what I'm trying to create. So I just find that I'm a lot more fruitful in what I return with if I go on my own. I used to like never even tell people where I was going so that people wouldn't
yeah,
turn up and then I'd get distracted. But now
yeah,
I'm a lot more relaxed about it. So if the waves are going to be good, I'll message some friends and I'll be like, hey, it
yeah,
looks good at this spot. Do you want to meet me there? And then,
yeah,
and they can. But the cool thing about that is I can be there in the dark getting my photos. And
yeah,
then when they turn up, then, and I think
yeah.
everyone kind of knows now that like my main priority is not shooting tight surf action.
I was
So
gonna,
people kind of understand that. Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna allude to.
I used to find it really frustrating as well. Whereas, say, if you're shooting in the water, you're swimming for 3 hours and then a perfect wave comes through, the light's super nice, someone
Mm.
takes off, and then they throw like a double shuckle with their hands or something in the tube, and you're like, man, like you just cooked that photo for me.
Yeah,
And so you're so reliant on what the surfer is doing to make a good surf photo. And I
Mm.
found if I can take that element out of the equation, the process of creating that image is so much more rewarding for me. It's just me in the ocean. You're not going to get mad at the ocean for not doing the right thing. So it just comes down to what you're doing personally. And yes, I found that a lot more rewarding to shoot that way.
That's cool. And there's not that expectation, or there's not that agenda that you feel, even if obviously if you're shooting for a client, there's an agenda that you're shooting for.
Hmm.
But even if you're inviting a surfer along, you've still, I'd say you'd still feel that expectation of, getting a good result for them. So it's good that you're
Yeah, definitely.
communicating now with them and saying, like, well, I'm just shooting landscapes, and if I get the 400 or the 600 out and shoot an action one, we might do that. But that's not.
Yeah,
I'm
you
not
s-
gonna, I'm not going to bring home 300 action photos of you tonight.
you still have that feeling where if someone gets like the best tube of the day and you don't get it, that you failed.
Yeah,
Even if
yeah,
even
yeah,
if even if that's not your primary reason for being there, if it goes down and you didn't get it, then
yeah,
of course they're going to come and be like, "Did you get that sick one I got?"
yeah.
So it's
No,
easy to
that,
kind of get sucked into that style.
yeah, definitely. And just going back to that, the these missions that you go on, say, okay, the swell lights up over the other side of the island or whatever. I suppose it's a funny question to ask, but like I'm just trying to visualize it. Like, are you just going for a strike mission for like 2 or 3 days, or even one day, or are you going for like 2 weeks, or what's the general sort of?
Um, I'll often just go for the window of what the good conditions are going to be in that zone.
Yeah,
And then if I'm doing a trip to the South Island, it's a long drive. It's like 24 hours to get to my favorite part of the South Island. once you include like the ferry, and then it's quite expensive to take your vehicle over the ferry. So if I go to the South Island, I'll go for a certain amount of time. So I'll be like, I'm going to go for 2 weeks, or I'm going to go for 3 weeks. It's often just however much time I have, I'll go for that much time. And the cool thing about the South Island is it doesn't matter if the surf's good or not, because there's so much other cool stuff down there.
Definitely.
And that's something I always say. If people ask me, should I come for a surf trip to New Zealand? And I'm like, no, you should come for a holiday to New Zealand and bring your surfboard, because you'll get some surfing days, but there's so much other cool stuff for you to experience, and you'd be blowing it if you came to New Zealand and you would just focus solely on surfing. And also you might be disappointed because you might not get that many good waves. But if you came for 2 weeks and you're prepared to drive around, I'm sure you'll get 3 or 4 days of good waves somewhere. The rest of that time, you could be using it to sort of enjoy how awesome the rest of the country is. So when I go down when I'm south, that's sort of what I'm aiming for as well, is just to, you look for your good surf days, and then those other days you might go into the mountains, or you might go for a cool hike, or go see something.
That is a really good summation of New Zealand. Like I said, I've only been there 3 or 4 times, but that is so true. And that's how I would suggest people approach it as well. It's not like going to Indo where you're just trying to get as many tubes as possible. And, even then you should try and like broaden yourself and go outside the experience. But I
feel like it's hard in Indo because everything's too perfect there. The swell comes in perfect, the reefs are perfect, the trade winds are perfect. So it's hard not to just concentrate on surfing because it's so good.
That's what happens, isn't it? Yeah, what happens. Yeah. And you've got an expectation as well. Whereas if you go on the expectation of like adventure or seeing rad scenery and stuff like that, it's just a different experience. But if you want to see and get inspired about that experience, I can't think of a better place to start with pre-ordering your book. I'm pretty stoked to get my hands on a copy, and like I said, I'll put the links below. But
awesome.
I think I've taken up enough of your time today. You might want to get out there and get a few sliders at Snapper. I think it's going. The tide's on the way in now, so better get out there.
Yeah, I'll go for
it. Is it now waves or?
Yeah, there were people shortboarding, but I know if I ride a shortboard, my wave count's going to be about a quarter of what it would be if I rode a longboard. So, I'm more of a quantity than quality kind of a guy. So, I just like to be surfing. Yeah,
go steal some of those waves off the Aussies.
For sure.
Too many. No, that's good, man. I really appreciate you coming on today. I think a lot of the photographers that, through my course and that follow me elsewhere will really appreciate, your insights and the insights into creating such a project like a book. Just must be so mammoth. And congratulate you for getting over the line and your obvious dedication to capturing New Zealand's beauty. So,
Cheers, Tom. Thanks for taking the time to let me blab on about it. No one's actually asked me about it, so it's fun to let a little bit of it out.
Oh, that's good, man. I'm stoked that I was the first to have a formal chat with you. But love to keep in touch in the future, and let me know how I can help you with the promotion of the book moving forward.
Sounds good. Cheers, Tom.
So there it was. Hope you enjoyed my interview with Rambo Estrada. I will put the links below to go and check out his book. So pre-sale right now. We filmed this on the 14th of September, and I think right through to early October at least, you'll be able to get pre-sale, which enables you to get 4 of his A4 prints. So I'd be taking advantage of that if I was you, because that little extra bonus would be good. And by the sounds of it, he doesn't have that many copies. So if you're watching this after October, you could probably get on there and buy it straight away if it hasn't already sold out. But once again, thanks Rambo for coming on. And if you've got any questions, leave them in the comments below. Love to hear them. Until next time, catch you soon.